Welcome to the April 23rd edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, brought to you by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem, New York-based diversity recruitment firm East Coast Executives. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If it's your first or 21st, please jump in the chat and tell us where you're from. The Digital Career Success Series, DCSS, is a professional development series that helps members of our Urban League Young Professional chapters and other diverse job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers through digital platforms such as webinars, Facebook, and Instagram Live. The goal is to provide an opportunity for professional development right from one's computer. If you want more, visit us at nuljobsnetwork.com. All right, I see the energy in the chat. Our guest is from DC, and I see DC in the chat as well, Northeast, Southeast. Appreciate that. Today's DCSS, data-driven decision-making, leveraging analytics to drive business decisions, features the one and only Kiana Moore. Kiana, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I'm so excited to have you here today. This is a conversation that is extremely important to our listeners, and we had a lot of feedback about this discussion, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to share a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Great, will do. Well, again, thanks so much for having me. Thanks to the National Urban League for putting on such great programming. I'm really excited to be here today. This is a passion topic of mine. I am a passionate health advocate, data enthusiast, and a change driver. I'm trained in systems engineering and computer science, so that's really the lens in which I operate. I usually bring a systems approach with the foundation in data science to just about everything I do. In my professional work, it's been centered around within the healthcare environment. I've worked across public health and the healthcare system, leveraging data to inform policy, to drive change and measure outcomes, all with the common goal of being able to increase access to care, make it more affordable, and improve quality and health outcomes. Previously, I've worked in research, policy, some implementation science, quality measurement, product development, program execution, again, all with the underlying or sort of common theme of like data. So I'm happy to talk to each of you. I think traditionally people have thought data to be reserved for data analysts or like maybe tech companies, but I'm so excited that we're going to talk about how each and every one of you can use it to increase your impact.
You know, I'm excited as well, not only just for this topic, but I think there's a discussion here that's a full circle discussion. And I know we spoke a little bit about it earlier, but share how you came to us today.
Yeah, so I happened to see on LinkedIn, I don't even remember how, but there was a topic on like boundaries, and Nicole Smith was the presenter. I was like, oh, let me just check this out. I'm in a space where like there's a lot going on. It'd be great to figure out how to set boundaries. And I had honestly never heard of the work that you guys were doing and was fascinated. So it was a full circle moment to have Nicole mention like, oh, hey, Kenneth is looking for someone to talk about data-driven decision-making. And that's like all you talk about. So nice to be back here on this side.
That's right, on this side of the camera, right? Nice to have you. I know this conversation comes about culture, whether it's corporate culture or even just an individual culture. And it's the power of that, right? So let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of research by both top business schools and consulting firms that show that organizations that use data and decision-making outperform their peers, many up to 20% more. And so it's really important. I think, it'd be hard to find a high-performing organization that isn't using data in their decision-making, in their metrics and tracking performance. And so now you're seeing more and more organizations and industries that haven't traditionally used data coming to leverage data, more importantly. And so it's important for everyone to know how to use data if you really want to maximize your impact. Also, I was just reading an article recently that showed they did a survey, and about 75% of business leaders don't trust how their teams are using data. So if nothing else, you can outperform your peers by just learning a few tips and tricks.
You know what? Explain that to me. So 75% of leadership really, they don't appreciate how their teams are using the data. Is there a structure set up that they follow or they should be following in regards to how they're leveraging that particular tool?
Yeah, I would say again, many of them aren't confident. And I think there are a range of things that are why. I think some don't have sort of a holistic strategy. So some may say, you know what, we do need to use data. Let me hire in an analyst, or maybe I'll borrow someone from another department and start tracking metrics. But if you aren't really tying those, and we'll talk a little bit later about a strategy that I use, but if you aren't really tying those back to the mission and what the organization, the goals and metrics that either the organization is striving toward, if you're just a frontline worker or individual contributor, maybe how your boss is, what their goals and things are, then it's really all for naught. So I think there isn't really always this holistic view. It's, you know, both top down, but also bottom up. It's really important to listen from people that are either, you know, again, on the front lines, that are working directly with clients, to understand, you know, how your product is being received. What about your messaging? So that, I think that's why.
So what I'm hearing here is a lot about communication. And anytime you're speaking about communicating things, you're talking about storytelling. So let's kind of jump into that, right? What's the piece of that that's really important as we go from the visualization and the storytelling to, I guess, influence change even?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, again, I'm biased. Start with the data. And I used to always really believe that, you know, data it's so important and it's needed to, you know, drive change. And most people will say, oh, you know, the numbers tell a story, the numbers speak for themselves. Well, the last time I checked, I haven't seen a spreadsheet that actually talks, right? So you need to tie in the story. And, you know, I started by just trying to make my charts, you know, like making better titles in my charts very early on in my career. Like, what's the message that I want to convey here? And that's sort of where it started, or knowing when to zoom in or zoom out to really sort of tell a story on what's happening. You know, everyone, especially the, you know, capturing people's attention these days, it's really difficult. So you have a few moments to really allow them to understand what the takeaway is. And it's part of your job to communicate that, you know, not just with the data, but also with, you know, the titles or storytelling. How can you make them drive change? And so that's where you bring together visually appealing charts, titles that, you know, again, capture the key takeaway, and then tying that storytelling in. So what's happening in the data? How do you, not just from a communications perspective, tell anecdotal stories, but tying them together to really drive change? And I've seen that. Maybe I'll give two quick examples of that. I was working with a policy shop that was trying to push ahead on some bills on the Hill. And they were having some success, but I came in and helped them gather data from for each of the sort of congressional districts, and then was able to help them quantify the impact. Okay, if you don't move on this legislation, this is the impact within your constituents. Here's the impact at the state level, but then also tying that with those anecdotal stories. And oftentimes the stories alone can be dismissed as, okay, maybe that's a person, or maybe there are a few people. But when you bring in the data and you tie, well, here's the impact of this, or here's the impact of not moving on this decision, it's so much more powerful.
So when this is amazing. So as I'm looking through it and thinking it through, so you're really discussing like, okay, look, we have a great story here, but people might not necessarily take to the story, or they'll see the story better if I can provide concrete information about how this is happening at scale. Am I hearing this right?
Yep, you're hearing exactly right. And again, you have to be thoughtful in what data you decide to share with them. You don't want to beat them over the head. You don't want to overwhelm them. You really want to pick key metrics that tie directly to the story. Again, you want them to make change, to do something, whether it's adopt a product or, you know, make a purchase. Again, it works across industries, make a policy decision or change. You really want to capture their attention. Another example, I shared the policy example, but another example that comes to mind is, I don't know how many of you have been burdened by our healthcare system. It is like no other industry. You show up, you need to get care, you have no idea how much it's going to cost. Oftentimes you don't know the quality. It's a complete mess. And so a few years back, Congress passed a law that hospitals and health insurance companies have to release price information. You should know how much it costs when you're going for healthcare. Well, I worked with, again, I told you, I really care about making healthcare more affordable, increasing access. So I work with a number of organizations, including large employers, to try to bend the cost curve. I help them get access to some of this data, publicly available, freely available data, to try to negotiate better prices for the people that were within their care. We saw very quickly, again, this is where metrics come into play. We were tracking how successful were we in moving toward our goal, which was, better negotiated contracted rates. And we saw really quickly the power of the healthcare industry is so much bigger. So we were not making as much progress as we wanted. So we went back, re-strategized, and found, again, identifying, there's some really heartbreaking stories about people that have been impacted by our healthcare system. So taking some of those stories, again, bringing the data to bear, we started engaging with policymakers as well as the media to get those stories and the information out there. And again, it's still very much a work in progress, but we've seen traction there.
Well, okay, I feel like I'm jumping around a little. I know there's a framework that exists that you follow in the way you present this, right? So let's kind of touch base on that. So if you're turning raw data into real world impact, you apply a particular framework.
Yeah, that's right. Again, my many years, I won't date myself, but my many years of working in the field, I sort of come up with an easy acronym to help guide organizations and even individuals through the process. So the first is inquire. You really want to start by asking the right questions. Again, from an organizational perspective, even down to an individual, what's the mission? What's the goal? What are you working toward? Let's ask some really good questions there. And then you want to gather and analyze the data. What is it telling you? Then you want to go, so that's the model. Then you want to present it, again, telling the story with visual clarity. You want to capture their attention. You want to make sure they walk away with the information that you want them to walk away with, make it easy to understand. And then you want to move. It's really important to understand that you need to go ahead and execute. You're never going to have all the information that you need to make a decision. And if you wait until you do, you're probably wrong and you're definitely too late. And so once you act, you really got to check. You want to monitor, measure, and track performance. How are you, again, incrementing toward that goal? I told you we had a goal of, in that hospital example, trying to negotiate better prices. We quickly were able to see we weren't making as much progress as we wanted, so we needed to pivot. So you want to check and then, adjust as needed. That's where tune comes in. You really want to fine tune and adjust your results and your strategy if needed. If you're not seeing the progress and the impact that you want, you need to adjust. And it sort of brings you right back around. Start asking more questions, model the data, and and so forth.
So as people set up, so we're talking about organizations and leaders at organizations. How does one even kind of start to think in this manner, or even set up a process that allows them to follow the impact formula?
Yeah, one example I'll say, and again, I really always want to make sure people can sort of walk away with, one or two or a few things they can do instantly. And I would say, even if you start at, an individual level, how do your performance goals, your annual performance, how do they tie back to your boss's goals, to the department goals, and then the organizational goals? And guess what? We just finished Q1. Now is as good a time as any to sit down with your boss and say, I've been reviewing my goals and I really just want to have a conversation. What supervisor is going to turn away a conversation where you're saying, I want to make sure my goals are aligned to your goals. Is what I'm doing directly beneficial to what you need to do, and then back to the organization? And so I think that's just one way to start. Again, asking good questions. How do my goals fit in? What I'm working on, is what I'm working on mission critical? And if not, how do I get closer to that? And then, start tracking information, whether it's sales calls or, outcomes. And even if you don't meet your goals, there's information and lessons learned in that. You want to document that. You want to share feedback. You can present that back to your supervisor, if you're, a department lead or, a manager, to whoever, the corporate executive committee, and so forth. And so that's really sort of how you can start to work through that model, track that, and then share it back. You'd be amazed at how beneficial that information is going to be moving up the organization.
So we're going to go back to the storytelling slide, because I'm hearing a lot of that, right? So as an employee, I have to think about presenting my case basically, but I'm doing this through storytelling. It's almost like people do in their personal lives, right? On social media, it's the highlight reel, right? So is this what we're doing? Is this kind of the same concept, but in a workplace?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Again, they don't have that much information or that much time to process the information. So you want to give them the highlight reel. Again, what's the key metric or data that matters to them? What's the decision that they're trying to make? Where are they trying to go? And what story can you tell? What data can you bring to bear to help them make progress on that?
Speaking of the highlight reel, if you're on today and you want to see the Digital Career Success Series, again, Kiana's given a bunch of information. Please do not hesitate to visit the Urban League Jobs Network channel on YouTube, where you'll find this session and all of our past sessions. So Kiana, you're given the highlight reel. How are you assessing feedback from that? Like, so you're sitting in front of, I guess, your leadership or your direct manager. How am I seeing if this is actually being received in the manner in which I want it to be?
Ask. Make no assumptions. Ask directly. Is this helpful? And if not, how so? Again, you're always learning. You always want to capture data. So you ask directly. And if it's not, what do you think would be more helpful? Right? It's all a learning process. So you have to ask directly. You want to make no assumptions. And if you do make an assumption, you want to test that assumption. And one way to do that is to ask.
All right. So I'm just walking through this whole scenario, right? So I ask, and they say, all right, this information is really valuable. Should I have back end deliverables on that, right? Things that I either need or want that allow us to move this conversation hopefully forward to either a promotion or a raise, right? Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, again, it will depend on what your goal is, but oftentimes it is a raise or, it is a promotion. And again, when I worked in corporate America, I was able to rise quickly because I would ask, again, my boss that question. Okay, what are your goals? How does this tie back to the mission? Anytime I got a new project, oh, well, what are the goals? What are the impacts? How does this work? And, you can't always, align yourself to a mission critical project, but you always want to understand whatever project you're working on, what is the goal and how are you moving towards success? And then start capturing that information. So again, if I was working to help my boss reach her goals, guess what she wanted to promote, and I would quantify, I would use metrics to capture how I'm helping make progress toward that goal. And it made it so much easier. And then again, when I was in leadership positions, I would actually have every one of my direct reports have a goal that tied directly to mine and then back to the mission. It made it so much easier for me to promote people within my chain of management because we could clearly articulate how it was moving the needle.
I see you with the high performing team. I love it. I love it. Okay. All right. So, what's interesting is I'm finding as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about this and I'm kind of reverse engineering it, right? This is something, if someone's choosing to pivot or make a career move, this is information that would be really valuable on a resume. So you're actually able to use this information to circle back and put it on a document where you want to show accomplishment-based statements. You want to show results and your wins and things of that nature. Do you advise that?
I absolutely advise that. And again, what you want to do is you want to figure out what your part was. So you say on your resume what you did and then how it contributed. And that's where, again, asking those questions. It also, again, it shows that you're thinking more broadly, again, for your leadership, for the organizational leadership. If you're asking those questions, it shows them that you're thinking more broad. You're not just an individual contributor. You are ready to get to the next level. And so I would absolutely say that. And again, what you do is you ask, okay, well, how is this contributed? Is it helping to increase revenue? Is it helping to, increase stakeholder engagement in some way? But if you ask those questions, you drop it into your performance evaluation and you also drop it into your resume. So you have those very clear metrics on how what you did contributed to corporate success. And that's going to help your resume fly to the top of the list every time.
I love it. I love it. I know people, sometimes your cadence is so great and you're giving so much information. And I know people get overwhelmed in some settings, right? So as people we're trying to get them started without getting them overwhelmed. So let's kind of walk through some of the things, the tools, the tips, and actions that people need to take to just kind of stay on track with this particular information?
Yeah, again, that's exactly right. So one thing I would say is, again, go back to that impact framework, just walking through or even thinking through each of the steps and questions is going to help you start to think differently about the work that you're doing and your impact. So certainly start there, write that down for a particular project, even go through your goals. One thing everyone can do is go back through your goals. Again, whether you're an individual contributor, you're an executive, you're leading a team, or you're a business owner. What were your goals for the year? What new information have you found out? And walk through that framework. That's one thing you can do. Again, if you've probably done your performance evaluation, I say back in October, November, we're 6 months in, we're also through the first quarter. Go back through those. If you don't know how it ties back to your supervisors, your departments, your organization's goals, have those conversations. I cannot tell you, if your supervisor has a problem with that conversation, it's going to help them out. You want to find another supervisor. There's something else going on there. So those are just two things you can do to start to make progress, and then start to, quantify, again, what are the steps? What are the things that you're doing? How is that helping you to make progress? So come up with a few, most organizations call them key performance indicators. What are some key measures to tell you if you're making progress toward your goal? And, pick 1, 2, no more than 3. You don't want a laundry list. You're going to get overwhelmed really quickly. Pick 1, pick 2, maybe 3. Start to track your progress. Again, check in, ask questions. And then once you get in a groove, you can add more.
I love this part of it. And we're speaking kind of from the general employee side, but if in leadership, how do they incorporate some of this in the way they're handling and managing their teams?
Yeah, again, it's back to making sure every single one of your team members are working toward your departmental goals and responsibilities. Another department's, oftentimes, again, as a leader, it's not just what you contribute, it's how are you maximizing impact for your team? How are you maximizing impact for the organization? And oftentimes that is supporting other departments. So what is your team doing to support other departments and then the broader mission of the organization more broadly? And again, have that conversation with your supervisor, the executive leadership committee, and start to track those metrics. Again, whether you're moving in the right direction or not, that's going to reveal itself very quickly. And you can quickly identify things that you don't need to be working on. And that's going to, again, have a direct impact on your work, but also the organization as a whole. And you'll uncover things that other people have not uncovered. And again, that is priceless for an organization that's trying to move, especially in this day and age, in this climate.
Well, let's talk about this climate right now. Very AI centric, very tech heavy. How is that changing the way people are leveraging this information?
Yeah,
have you seen it?
Yeah, no, it is great. Let me tell you, AI is your friend, but is only as good. I want to tell you, be careful. It is only as good as the questions you ask it, the input you give it, and the validation that comes out. We all know these tools are biased. They can be helpful, but again, I think that goes back to the executive or the business leaders that don't have the confidence in their teams. They don't always know. They don't have the strategy, the infrastructure in place to make sure they're getting they're validating the results. And AI has improved dramatically, but it's biased and it still gives misinformation. And so you really need to know what you're doing, what you're asking it. You need to have a process for being able to validate the results and then track and measure the progress moving forward. But absolutely, I would say use it. But again, use it as a brainstorming. Use it to assist you, not to direct your work.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially currently, for people to not be afraid to use it and leverage it. And even if it's a trial and error thing, this getting information and then knowing what that information is and what to do with it, but definitely proofing through as you, and that's both sides of it, candidates and leadership, right?
That's exactly right. And maybe if I can add, start with things that you already know. You already know the answer. You're already tracking something. Use the AI to help you to validate what you've already done. Maybe point out things that you didn't see initially. So start with what you know, and then you can build from there.
I want to make sure that people kind of understand that there are certain settings where you present with this information. So like this, I see you nodding your head. Can we speak a little bit about that? I don't know if this is something like you take someone to lunch and then start bringing out this information. Is that the proper place, or should it be a little more defined?
And when you say bring up, you mean just in terms of like data-driven decision making?
Exactly.
Yeah. Again, I'm biased. You probably shouldn't ask me. I'll bring it up any and everywhere, right? Again, because data, I mean, we live in a world that runs on data. I mean, the amount of data that's produced it's like insurmountable. So I don't think that moving forward, whether it's, tracking on your AI, your watch, or, tracking your steps or whatever, like, I mean, everything is driven off data. So we do need a foundational level of like data literacy within our country and within the workforce. So I would say that it's really key. And quite frankly, I think it belongs in each and every conversation. Again, I think it has its place, and so you want to couple it with storytelling and other things. But we run on a world of data, so I think if we're not asking questions, if we're not tracking information, we're going to fall behind.
Yeah, I think, you were speaking about keeping the momentum, especially from a leadership standpoint. And I think, I believe that if people see, it's like most things, right? If it's happening at the top, it can influence things as it trickles down, right? And I think if there's an importance placed on it there, then people may leverage it, and then you can start really clearly seeing results. And maybe that takes some of the bias out of those everyday decision makings. Am I right in that?
You are right. And then again, I would say if you want to stand out and be a leader, even if it's not happening within your, chain of command or your organization, start. The organizations that are not using data to drive decisions are falling behind. So you will have information from your engagements with clients, from your work on, products, on tools, on what, communications, messaging, marketing. You will have key information that is not being tracked. And so again, use that framework, start asking some questions, model some things, and then share. You're not going to have everything right to start. None of us do, but at least you're starting, and you will be leading and getting folks in your organization to start to think about this.
I love that part. You're setting yourself up as a leader. So I want to ask the question, and there will be a Q&A section. Please drop your questions into the chat. We'll storm and get them answered by Kiana in the Q&A. But I have a question, like, how can professionals at any stage of their career kind of begin just incorporating this into everyday decision making?
Yeah, again, I would say you start one place that's easy to start, again, because who doesn't want to get promoted? Start with your goals, again, and then ask a question. How are they directly contributing to the success of the department, the organization, depending on where you are within the organization? Or if you're a business leader, how is this helping me get closer to my goals? Is it, again, revenue? Is it exposure? Is it stakeholder engagement? So go through that process just with your goals to start. Because again, that's, where you want to go. So start tracking, how do I make progress there? And it's breaking it down. There may be quarterly objectives that you need to meet, monthly, weekly. And so really start to identify what those are, and then track how you're moving. Again, just start somewhere, and then you'll start to learn and be able to adapt and say, oh, well, I asked this question, but really I should have, or I made this assumption. And then because I am tracking how I'm progressing, I realize, oh, that was actually a wrong assumption. Maybe the users are behaving in a different way. And so then you can make that adjustment before it's too late. You're not waiting until the end of the year to get feedback, or until you lose a contract. You're able to actually get that information in real time.
And I love the whole taking kind of control of your career concept to that. Using it not only to kind of add value and show kind of where you have made a difference, but also using it to keep yourself accountable.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's the best accountability tool. And again, you always learn. So you're not waiting until the end of the year or however long to realize you're off course. You can adjust and adapt in real time. And that is so valuable for yourself as an individual, for your organization as well.
Yeah. So listen, I rarely do this, but I think today's the day. We have so many questions in the Q&A that we might need to get into the Q&A early today. So
Let's do it.
yeah, so if you're fine with that, let's jump into the Q&A. I'm going to start at the top here. Dave, great job starring up these questions. But Timothy says he's curious about the ways AI tools like ChatGPT assist with making meaning out of analytics and data. What are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, ChatGPT, Julius, there are a number of tools out there. I, tend to be on these calls that are recorded and can live on, cautious about shouting out one tool versus the other. There are also some industry specific, and there's a lot of progress that's being made. So what I would say is, again, start with what you know. Ask it some questions where you know the answer to it. Use multiple, again, a ChatGPT, a Claude. Ask the same question to multiple of the, chat tools and see what sort of responses you're going to get. But always start with things that you know so you can validate and then adjust.
Yeah, I think it's probably important to just not assume that the LLM is accurate in your particular case, right? So
that's it. And even again, with me, I'm always double checking. That's why, again, going through that framework is so important. Even if you start to move in on something, again, you're never going to know all the information. So start moving, start executing, but track it. And then you're going to realize, oh, wow, I forgot to ask it this, or I forgot to give it this context. And then that's going to help tweak it. Again, that's where you're adjusting and refining your process in real time, and then keep moving, and then adjust and refine, and then keep moving to more.
All right, let's keep moving to more because we have more questions here. So LaShonda wants to know, are there any tips that you offer when it comes to catering to your audience, leaders, peers, end users?
Oh, that's a really great question. And that's something I had to learn throughout my career. I worked in, I mentioned sort of research, and, not to throw any shade on my researchers out there, because I enjoy research too, but they tend to like more bland charts. And, executives or people that are making decisions, they want you to share with them the key takeaways. If I'm looking at this information, what should I take away from it? Again, they can make their own assumptions and review the chart, but you want to give them at least one key takeaway from the chart that's going to be really helpful in moving the information forward. And then use your chart titles and information if you're presenting on a slide. Use that to convey the really key information that you want them to take away from it. Again, you don't want to leave any room for interpretation. Oftentimes we're using this to either convince someone to, drive them to take action or take change. And you want to make sure you don't leave any room for their interpretation or assumptions for them to make that likely could be wrong.
Okay, got you. Are there any things that you're using, like you're speaking about charts and things of that nature? Do you have any suggestions for tools, resources, software programs to continuously store your information and track it, and then to place it into some system that allows one to create an actual living document?
Yeah, there are a lot. I would say, I usually advise when I'm working with people, start low tech, Excel doc, Google Sheets, especially if you're working across an organization, it can be shared. Start there. And you can leverage AI. You can build the tool, you can build it within Excel yourself, or you can plop it into AI. Again, be careful. You don't want to put any proprietary information in there. So follow your organization's rules of engagement with AI, but that's another tool. Oftentimes, if the information can be publicly available, things like Tableau, or they'll offer free licenses. And so just start playing around with it. But that's a really good question.
I appreciate the answer. All right, so listen, I think this is falling in your wheelhouse right here. How can community organizations gather appropriate data to shift the traditional community benefits and offerings of local dominant nonprofit healthcare systems?
Ooh, Roland, please reach out. I'm going to drop my LinkedIn and a Calendly, community-based organizations I work with them a lot. I love, again, I share it. I have a passion for improving healthcare, and oh man, they're doing God's work. So where I think that's important, again, thinking back to what's your mission? So go back to your mission, start to identify how are each of the programs, we can do a list of the programs that you're working on. How does that directly tie back to your mission when you're thinking about, your budget and things like that? How is that tying to your mission? What, you can think about like percentages and, the effort. Also, I think there are a lot of, well, there have been until the current administration started removing data, but I think there are a lot of organizations that are coming into play that are replacing what was taken down. But you'd be surprised how much publicly available information is out there for community-based organizations. And so again, I'll say reach out. I'd be happy to point you to specific sources that could be helpful. But there's a lot of information out there for community-based organizations.
And speaking of helpful, we're here on the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series with Kiana Moore, CEO of Moore Consulting. You are killing these questions. I really appreciate you. We're doing a rapid fire Q&A right here today with Kiana. And
coming.
She is definitely delivering. All right, we want to jump into the next question. Which visualization tools are recommended? And you mentioned some of these here. So if you want to just reiterate some of that, at least we'll get this question answered.
Yeah, again, I would say it depends on what you're using it for. It depends on budget. Some of them, again, I mentioned there are some publicly available options for free. Some of them can get really pricey. So it depends on your budget and what your use case is. So that I know it feels like a non-answer, but again, depends on your budget, depends on what you're using it for. I would start with the free versions to start, again, just to play around and get comfortable. And then depending on your budget and what you're using it for, again, I'm happy to help offer some recommendations.
Definitely appreciate that. Listen, Patricia, I see the question. We do not want you to be confused. We will answer this question for you. Patricia wants to know, the data that's available is based on the founder, right? Or is it based on what the goals of the organization are? Isn't the data that you are collecting based on what the system has been set up to capture?
So again, it depends on, it's a really great question, Patricia. Again, it depends on, I've sort of been speaking sort of across organizational structure. And so maybe that's where the confusion came in. I want to make sure, again, everyone can walk away with a little something. So from an individual level, depending on what you're working on, there might be a system in place that are tracking metrics, and in which case, you use that. But I'm saying, again, from an individual perspective, what you can do is look at your goals, and you can have your own little spreadsheet and start tracking things on your own, and then identifying insights and then sharing that up your chain. That might then get pulled into your organizational structure, and they might adjust how they're capturing things. Again, I think the most successful organizations are top down and bottom up. They know and appreciate that individuals that are on the front lines have a lot more access to information and insights than maybe the executives do. And so they welcome that information. So it might be tracking something within your organizational system, or it might be something new. And again, that's where leaders are identified. What are we not thinking about? Because oftentimes, again, organization CEOs, you gather information you can, you make the assessments, you start to move out, but there are a lot of assumptions that were made. What's happening on the ground is not always what you expected. And so oftentimes the people that are working within up and down the organization have access to that information and can glean insights. So
in your business, when you start speaking to people just about decision-making and how they're coming to decisions, like this is the direct line. Am I correct?
That's it. That's exactly right. And again, it depends on where you're focused. It might be, I'm a nonprofit. I need to add a new member to my board of directors. Okay. Sometimes they're like, oh, let me look at a flashy resume. Well, wait, how does that person track back to your mission? How is it getting you to where you need to go? I would say set your board members or even your, executives down and identify which direct pieces of the mission and getting you toward your goals. How are they contributing and where are the gaps? Again, starting is that simple. And many organizations are like, oh, wow, okay, I have not been moving on this particular goal because I did not realize that I had a gap here. And so when they're thinking about the next, either it's a vendor that they're going to work with, or again, a board member, it could be a new software tool. Are you tying that all back and then documenting that information so you can see? And then guess what? Once you do that, you want to track it. So was this the right decision? Or maybe there was something that you overlooked, but if you're not tracking that, then you won't know and you won't be able to move more quickly.
Wow, appreciate that answer. Let's go to Kennedy's question. So he's ran into some barriers with collecting this type of information, especially qualitative. What would you recommend for professionals who have leaders who are resistant to the collection methods, such as surveys, focus groups, etc.?
Yeah, I would say surveys I just did a recent study around survey statistical research, and, people just aren't taking surveys in the way that they used to. So I do think, again, tracking this information, it's going to be helpful to identify what are alternatives. Do I need to increase my sample size? And if so, what are the costs? But then if you can tie that back to the mission, or what other sources are you doing focus groups? Are you able to collect data to supplement it? Again, being able to track that will help you better make the case of whether we need to invest in, again, a larger sample size or finding alternative data sources. But if you're not tracking it, if you're not able to convey that information back, then it really does make it difficult for the decision maker, for an executive, to say we should move forward on that. But again, that's where the data and the storytelling comes in. You let them know what is the impact of inaction, and you can quantify that.
Is it extremely important? Oftentimes you fill out a survey and you don't get that information back. You never receive it back. You never, I completed the survey. I'd like to know kind of what happened after that. How important is that to get people to be maybe a little more excited about the process of filling out surveys and things of that nature?
Again, that's back to the feedback, right? There are a number of organizations that I do work with that collect surveys. And one way that we get better engagement is what the person that you're trying to get the information from, what is it that they need or want, or how could you benefit them? And then sharing that information back. So sometimes it is the full survey. Sometimes there's, tidbits of the survey. And so again, you're collecting the information from them because there's something that you want to know, feed it right back to them. So absolutely, Kenneth, that's a really, really great question. And that will help with uptake and engagement.
All right, I love it. Shamik, we have a question from you. Are there free resources to gain proficiency within the data visualization tools you shared?
Yeah, there are lots of, right now, YouTube, there are lots of people that give courses. Coursera, there are a lot of online courses that are free. I don't even have it up, but I actually have a list, and I'll share it with Kenneth, and maybe we can get it out. There are 10 different universities and online platforms that are offering courses, and I will be sure to share that.
Look at you. You got people looking at this as a career move. I love it.
It is. Everyone needs it.
Yes.
It will definitely maximize your impact for sure.
So Jade has a question regarding your career, actually. What pushed you to move from corporate America to starting your own consulting practice? And also what key skills that you learned in your career that gave you the confidence to move into your own practice? So what made you do it, and why were you so confident about doing it? Or were you? I think people assume people are confident, but it's you got to get out there and get clients and things of that nature, right?
That is true. I fell into this, and to try to keep the story short, it was during COVID, terrible experience with the healthcare system. I was caretaking for my mom. I just really needed some time, so I stepped away from corporate America, very much expecting to go back to it. I liked the structure, and there was so much about it. I knew I could come up with very clear metrics and could track things. And I was able to rise very quickly so I knew how to work in corporate America. And then again, I got out, took care of my mom, and there were a few organizations that I worked with in the past that either wanted me to come join them, and I wasn't ready. And we just started doing some work on the side. And I really saw this need for organizations to better track and understand. And again, very simply and easily, but they were making some progress, but there was so much that they didn't see and understand by not using data to drive decisions. And because that was my bias and all I could think and do, I grew a business out of it, and I love it. I don't think I would do any other way, because I'm able to have so much more impact on the end consumer in a way by helping organizations and leaders make more informed decisions. And again, sharing the secret about this. If you want to get promoted, this is the way to do it. You want to increase your impact as an organizational leader, this is the way to do it. And so I was able to just see my impact get magnified by sort of coming out of the corporate structure and then being able to help more people and more organizations.
You know, I love when people are mission aligned, and you completely, I can tell that you love what you do and you love sharing these stories in this way. So kudos to you for finding that space and that spot for yourself. We have a question from Tia. What if the team doesn't have metrics and the leader is trying to develop them, right? So how do you guide a person that would like to give that type of feedback? Where would they start?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Tia, if I don't fully answer your question, please feel free to reach out. I'll drop my contact in the chat again. Again, I would say tying what you're doing back to your supervisor's goals, and they may not see it, right? They might not be aware, but I think then tying it from, their goals back to the organizational goals is, I've not met anyone that's not, if they were not aware, they're like, oh, wow, yeah, this is going to help me. It's going to help the organization. If you still get resistance, find another leader within the organization where your work is tangentially aligned. How can you help them? They will then be an advocate, and you will also be able to show that how your work is directly contributing to them, and you help them start to think in that way. It's going to catch on, because again, organizations that are not using data to drive decisions are falling behind. And so what you'll find out if you just start tracking for a while, you will start to share insights that people hadn't seen or uncovered. And that's going to be so valuable. It's going to be really hard to say no.
And that's really the goal, right? Providing a great argument.
That's it.
Love it. Love it. All right, I'm going to jump into the next question. This is from Nicole. We're all doing more work than ever. So how do we know when to DIY versus when it's time to bring in an expert to help with the work? So how do people make a decision on, all right, I'm trying to do this myself, but maybe I need to bring Kiana in to really get down to the bottom of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one way is how closely are you getting toward your goals? And if you find yourself continuing to slip, you're not meeting your goals, or you don't even know where to start, that's a good case to bring someone in just to review it and help you sort of get the infrastructure and get comfortable in doing it. Like with anything new, right? It's uncomfortable when you get started, but the more you do it, the more comfortable it gets, the more you understand, the more you can track where you're going. So I would say, are you meeting your goals? Are you moving at the pace you want to? Are you even tracking? And then again, try the framework, try to start doing it on your own and see if you're making the progress you want, in which case you're doing great. And if not, it probably makes sense to bring in someone. And I say, again, start small, have someone come in and review what you're doing, offer suggestions, and maybe help you sort of build a strategy. And then maybe from there, you can go and attempt to implement, or maybe you have them. A lot of what I do is I try to work myself out of a job. So let's create the structure. Again, start small, start low tech, and then we build. I mean, the worst thing you want to do is invest a lot of money in a solution, a software that you may or may not need, or that may, fit your needs in the short term, but you still don't even know what you're doing. So I usually say start small. You want to really understand what you're doing, where you're going, and then you start to layer the tech on top of that.
Love it. Love it. If we're in an environment where we see that there's some inefficiencies, right, in the way people are using the information, right? How do we make the case to be more data-driven?
So again, I think just sharing that, and I would also say, often I will just identify sort of data tidbits that are out there. I mean, we're in the information age, so there's so much information that's out there. So often what you can do is just do a little bit of benchmarking to compare, one to another, your organization to another that's within your industry. And then I think quickly you'll be able to see the organizations that are using data to drive decisions are outperforming you.
Got it. I have a question. So what mistakes are you seeing leaders make in this area? Like when you come in and you start looking at the processes, where are you saying, okay, this might be a mistake that you guys are making and getting the information that you really want?
Yeah, one like common one is people don't always tie back to their mission or really where they want to go. I think people are like, oh, this is a great new project, or this is a new space I want to enter into. Let's get started, and they just jump right in. I think another is not identifying what are the key success metrics to start. How do we know we're achieving success? What are some short-term and long-term measures to know that we're moving in the right direction? And oftentimes, if you come up with that, you can, it's fail fast, right? If you are very clear about where you want to go, you come up with some short-term measures. Sometimes you can, know you're going on the right path. Sometimes it does take longer, but again, are you making progress? And so 2 key things are tying it back to your mission or your goals. And then before you even get started, how do I know I'm reaching success? And if you can ask that question and then continue to sort of check in, you'll be able to pivot or, bring on more resources and then make the case for bringing on those resources, right? Because you can say, this is how far I've gotten. These are the barriers that are, in place for helping us to continue to progress. And this is what I need to continue to move forward.
Love it. So Kiana, in your work with Moore Consulting, how have you seen data transform business strategies in real time? Like, can you share a specific example?
Oh, absolutely. So I was working with an organization. They had this really great product, and they pulled me in, and they didn't have the usage that they needed. And so what we started doing was, again, followed that impact, started asking questions. So we took a group of people that were using it and ones that weren't, and found out, asked, well, why weren't they? What were some of their goals? Again, tying it back to the end user's goals and, what their mission or objectives were. And so we found that out, created a couple little mock-ups. Again, we sort of modeled it, collected data, created a few options, did a little beta testing. Again, we started to get feedback, and then we were able to make adjustments there. And they were able to, one short-term metric, increase usage by 50%. And then they were able to expand it. And within 2 years, they increased revenue by $1 million.
Wow, that's impactful. I love it. All right, that Q&A was amazing. I think we went like 25 minutes of questions. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to offer our audience any closing remark.
Yeah, I want to say just get started. Again, I'm going to drop my LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a message in LinkedIn. I also am dropping a link if you want to chat more, have some questions. I kind of answered your question, but you have something more specific. Please reach out. I love talking about this stuff. I love, helping people increase their impact, amplify their impact by using data to drive decisions. So please reach out.
Yes, please reach out indeed. I want to thank you for joining us today. You were simply amazing. Listen, if you're in our audience and you want to connect with Kiana, I know she just dropped her information into the actual chat, but here it goes again. You can lock in and connect with her at her website and also by using LinkedIn. Kiana is active out here. She's busy, but I'm sure she'll get back to you accordingly. You've provided such a ton of great information today. I want to thank you for just delivering big time on the Urban League Jobs Network platform. If you want to connect with me, it's Kenneth L. Johnson, East Coast Executives, or you can hit me on LinkedIn. Please hit me on LinkedIn. We're doing a Power of Networking conversation on May 1st. There's information on LinkedIn about that, doing that on the Indeed platform. And also you can lock in with us on Instagram. Listen, I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the National Urban League, but we do this again in 2 weeks. So you can join us for creating safe spaces, enhancing psychological safety in teams. Had the opportunity to speak to both of these young women. It'll be on the 7th of May, and you don't want to miss this one, trust me. All right, well, look, on behalf of the National Urban League, Corey O'Donnell, thank you so very much for producing Backstage. Wanda Jackson for believing in the platform and believing in my ability to deliver this to you, and the entire National Urban League team for supporting us. I'd like to say thank you, not only to Kiana, but to all of you for joining us for another edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. I'm Kenneth L. Johnson. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with Kiana, making incredible things happen. And also visit the nuljobsnetworkpage.com. All right? We'll see you in 2 weeks, May 7th, creating safe spaces. Thank you all.